They called me an extra mouth to feed, as if sorrow eats more than it already does. The words were flat, like a plate you throw away because it never belonged to your table. It's not personal, Chad said, standing in his own kitchen with a dish towel over his shoulder like a costume for decency. You can't just stay here forever. Amanda didn't look up from her phone. She scrolled the way people drive past accidents, curious and afraid it might be someone they know. My name is Margaret, and before I became an expense line in my daughter's marriage, I was a wife who learned how long grief can make a house echo. The day my husband died, the light in our kitchen turned the color of old honey. I washed the same cup 3 times and set it down gently each time, as if the cup could break from the sound of bad news. We had been married 43 years. Tom carried his keys like promises and laughed from the stomach like a man who trusted the week to turn out all right. I slept hardly at all that first night, and when morning held my face without judgment, I told myself aloud 3 truths the house could understand. The cup is clean. The window is open. The light is kind. Then I added a 4th, because math always steadied me, I am still here. 2 months later I moved into Amanda's spare room because people tell you not to be alone, and I listened. The room had a view of a parking lot and one stubborn tree, the kind that survives more weather than it deserves. I made myself small. I labeled my groceries so I wouldn't steal anyone's yogurt. I folded quiet into the towels. I said thank you for everything until the word lost a little of its pronunciation. Grief makes you clumsy with your hands and careful with your voice. I cooked on Sundays, meatloaf that remembers how thin paychecks can be, soup that forgives whoever didn't chop the onions fine enough. Chad complimented the meals like he was signing a receipt. Good job, he'd say, as if hospitality were an employee. He never left a tip. Amanda used to be a girl who would run down the hallway in her socks and slide into me like home plate. After college, she learned newer manners, how to take a meeting, how to be concise, how to apologize without using the word sorry. She loved big and fast. And then she loved Chad. He had forearms like answers and a smile that worked hard when people were watching. He's a doer, she said. I knew that word. It can mean a man who pays attention to work. It can also mean a man who doesn't like rooms where he isn't the loudest object. It started with little jokes. You're spoiling us, Margaret, do you have any coupons for rent? Then rules. A chore list where my name appeared more often because I was home during the day. Then a conversation about utilities, which flickered into a talk about contributing, which became a talk about boundaries, which is a word people use when they don't want to say eviction. It's not personal, he repeated the day he asked me to leave. Amanda stared at her phone like it was hiring. I took 2 suitcases and the recipe box with grease like thumbprints of our better days. I took Tom's watch, the one that ticked too loudly when he fell asleep in his chair. I took the habit of saying 3 truths out loud. The cup is clean. The window is open. The light is kind. But that night in the budget motel the cup was paper, the window was stuck, and the light hummed with an insect's voice. I said them anyway. Sometimes the truth has to be stronger than the room. When the door closed behind me at Amanda's place, the hallway smelled like someone else's dinner and the disinfectant they used to erase the idea of strangers. The elevator doors opened and 2 children ran in with pool noodles, arguing about who could make a bigger wave in a pool too small for waves, and I remembered taking Amanda to swim lessons, how she'd grip the edge and look back, checking that I was still there even though she knew I was. Do you think a mother ever stops answering that silent question? Do you think a daughter ever stops asking it? At the motel the bedspread was all geometry, triangles, squares, someone's idea of cheer. I lay down very carefully as if the mattress might hold a grudge. And by the second night, when the vending machine learned my preferred number and the ice bucket learned my hand, I did what women do when the ground gives way under polite feet. I looked for a story that explained the whole. A story is a kind of rope if you pull on the right end. Mine began not with Tom, not with Chad, not with the motel's rasping air. Mine began with my mother's diary, which lived like a quiet neighbor at the back of the lowest drawer. The diary smelled faintly of lilac and rain that never quite arrived. My mother had been a small woman with careful pens. She ironed pillowcases, as if dreams deserved crisp edges. On the first page I opened, her handwriting leaned a little right, like the sentence was late for something. If anyone ever needs to know, it said, the name is Harold Sterling. The words didn't feel like confession. They felt like a door that had decided it was ready to be a door. I knew that name the way anyone knows it if they listen to the business report on the radio when they're cooking. Harold Sterling, oil, the old-fashioned kind with pipelines and men in hard hats and checks signed so neatly they looked printed. He had been a bachelor on the front page, a father on none. He was kind. My mother wrote on a Tuesday when I was 5 and she was heavy with something I didn't have a word for then, permission. He wanted to do right, and the way he knew wasn't marriage. He visited twice. He sent money always. He came to the window once on a snowy December and said our girl should never feel less than wanted. She didn't write his name again for a whole year. Mother's edit for love. Do you think the past knows when it's being looked at? The room went very still. The motel air conditioner took a breath and waited. I turned the page. A stack of legal papers waited under the diary, thin as secrets. A trust. My mother's name. Mine. A letter with Harold Sterling's signature, H&S shaped like anchors. It spoke of a child in plain terms and a promise with no theater. If the child of Margaret's mother requires protection, if she is ever abandoned, coerced, or betrayed by those who should hold her dear, he'd written, then these funds shall be released to her in full without contest. My mother had tucked it away the year before she died, then never told me. She must have thought I would never require protection. We always think the weather will hold. Adler and Johns, Counsel for Trust Administration, the letterhead said. People put names on doors, but the real door is the secretary who answers. The woman on the line spoke like a kettle before boil, low, steady. Mrs. Morgan, she said when I gave my name, I've been waiting to hear that voice for 30 years. She told me the paperwork was dry and unimaginative and we could, if I'd like, treat it like any other Tuesday. I cried the way a quiet person cries, carefully, with the throat and the eyes and not a lot of sound. She said to come in tomorrow. Bring the diary, she said. Bring nothing else but yourself. On the bus the morning air tasted like a silver coin. The city looked taller from the angle of a person no one expects to be important. Adler's lobby smelled like lemon oil and safety, which is to say it smelled like cleaning done by someone who isn't angry at you. Mr. Johns himself shook my hand the way a man shakes the hand of a woman who knows the price of eggs. He opened the file the way a doctor opens a chart, no drama, all attention. Your mother was brave, he said. Sterling was careful. The trust did what it was supposed to. And you, Margaret, have a choice. I'd spent my life without choices that mattered much beyond what to make for dinner and whether to speak when a man's pride is on the line. I would like to choose to be a person again, I said. He smiled. That we can do. The accounts were there, old money with no arrogance. It had grown the way trees grow when no one takes pictures of them. There was enough to turn the word survival into the word life. There was enough to turn a motel key into a house key. There was enough to give away without fear that the giving would leave me cold. On the bus ride back, I watched a mother braid her child's hair 3 seats ahead. She did it from memory, fingers moving like they remembered a song. I wondered when Amanda stopped letting me braid hers. Probably the day after high school, when independence sounded like a new haircut and a lease with a friend who didn't know where the good forks lived. I wanted to call her, to say I had a way to steady the ground, that we could start over, that nobody has to be anyone's extra mouth. But I heard Chad's voice in my memory, it's not personal, and I put my phone away. A door needs a handle on both sides if it's going to open without splinters. At night in the motel, I pressed the diary to my chest, then placed it flat like a map. Another page waited. If Margaret ever finds herself under the boot of someone small, my mother had written, not from anger but as if stating the weather, she will remember that dignity is repossessable. I laughed, I couldn't help it. Dignity, repossessed. I fell asleep with the word in my mouth like a mint. Do you think dignity can be repossessed? Do you think peace can be bought and still keep its flavor? If any part of this sounds like your kitchen, not the motel, if you are whispering 3 truths to keep your spine, leave me 1 word below. Here, listening, begin. If you want to know what I did next, which was both petty and not, subscribe. We keep the porch light on for people who arrive after dark. I did not buy revenge. I bought options. Options are what you hand a woman who's been told she is a burden. Options are how you teach a storm your name. First I rented an apartment with windows that remembered leaves. I set a kettle on a stove that clicked its readiness. I bought 2 towels the color of rain and a rug that didn't tell anyone who had stepped on it before me. Then I opened a file on the small table by the window and gave my new breath a project. Chad and Amanda lived in a building that called itself luxury with a straight face. The lobby had mirrors that have never known fingerprints. The elevators had nerves of steel and music that apologized for being alive. The rent, for people with our last name, had been a stretch. They'd made it a badge. He bragged about it to waiters. She mentioned it at baby showers like she was bench-pressing kindness. The building, of course, was owned by a company with a name no one would think to look up if they weren't paid to. A nest of LLCs, each a shell like a stack of pail bowls. Johns explained them to me like a teacher who knows his student has made more casseroles than tax decisions. If you want to remain anonymous, he said, we'll put you where the light is soft. I started an entity with a plain name, Sycamore Homes. I chose it because there was a sycamore behind our old house the size of a brave memory. We bought small at first, 2 units in a building no one brags about, a duplex where the front stoop talks to the sidewalk all day, a 4plex with a laundry room that smells like courage. We kept rents honest. We repaired things before they turned into apologies. I learned that roofs sag when people say later to them too many times. I learned that old windows can be coaxed back into true if you treat the sash like an elder and not like a nuisance. Owning felt less like power and more like responsibility handed to me by my mother's handwriting. Still, when the chance came to purchase Amanda's building from a group of owners who didn't love the word maintenance, I felt that small heat in my chest that can be righteous or reckless. Market rates will go up, Johns warned. It will not be personal, he added, and we both nearly smiled. I set terms that were not cruel but were clear. Deferred costs had to be faced, safety had to be bought, the reserve fund had to be fed. The math put market where special had lived. For most units, rent went up by a quarter. For a handful, the ones whose current numbers had lived in a fantasy, rent rose by more. One of those units was Amanda and Chad's. I put the paper in the envelope with a sigh. Instead of a thrill. A mother should not take pleasure in her child's overdue arithmetic. But a mother should not fear the math. The notice went out under Sycamore's letterhead, not my name. I followed the law, timelines, caps, options to move to newly renovated units later at a discount, a hotline for questions. I wrote the hotline script myself so the young voices answering would sound like someone's aunt. The day the envelopes landed in the mailboxes, the building's air changed. People talk when they live that close to each other. You could taste the opinion in the hallway. Some shrugged and said it was coming. Some said words the carpet had never heard. Chad said them loudest. He stormed into the manager's office with a swagger that could scratch furniture. I know how this works, he told the young woman, whose name was Priya and who has 2 brothers who don't scare her. You pick on the decent tenants to make up your losses. Priya calmly slid the spreadsheet across the table. Numbers don't raise their voices. You've been paying $600 below market for 4 years, she said. We've deferred pest control and stairwell lighting to keep this place livable without raising anyone. We can't do that anymore. He called her names that were not in her job description. She pointed to the sign that said the office was a respectful place. He laughed as if manners were optional. At home later I imagined Amanda opening the letter, seeing the math, looking up for help and finding Chad instead. I imagined him turning red in the face and loud in the throat. I pictured her quiet, the way women go quiet when the lake in front of them is suddenly farther than their legs. I wanted to call. I didn't. I made tea and pressed my palm to the counter until my hand remembered it had bones. The building needed repairs you could no longer ignore. Fire doors that didn't quite latch, stairwells with lights that flickered, a boiler that asked for retirement every night. We hired crews. We posted schedules. Mandatory tenant meeting, the notice read, to explain building improvements, timeline, and rent adjustments. I planned to sit in the back and let the property manager talk. And then, the night before, I stood at my kitchen window and watched the sycamore lose 2 leaves in the same breath. I knew what to do. Do you think the past ever forgives you for not knowing your lines? Do you think a mother is allowed to walk into a room and tell the truth without apologizing for taking up the mic? If you've ever watched yourself become a person with edges again, leave one word below the edge, steady, begin. And if you want to hear what happened in that meeting, come sit closer to the window with me. We'll keep the lights low. People think confrontations happen with the volume turned up. Sometimes the loudest thing is a microphone that doesn't squeal. The community room on the first floor was all folding chairs and a table where someone had put out store cookies because kindness doesn't require a kitchen. Tenants shuffled in wearing work boots, scrubs, tiredness, and hope. Priya adjusted the laptop like it might take offense. I wore the plain gray sweater Tom loved because it made my eyes look like weather he trusted. Chad arrived last, late enough to make an entrance, with Amanda half a step behind him and a sigh on her face that meant she'd already done the math. He scanned the room for a weak spot. They always do. He found me and saw just a woman with a soft sweater. He dismissed me like a lobby chair. Priya began. We're here to walk you through the improvements, the costs, and what we can do to make this doable, she said. She spoke like a nurse who's learned how to deliver a diagnosis with dignity. She pointed to before and after photos of stairwells that will stop being shadows, of fire doors that will finally end arguments with gravity, of a new boiler that believes in January. She explained the rent adjustments and the phases and the appeal process. Chad stood and announced his expertise like a stopwatch. None of this is legal, he proclaimed. Priya handed him a copy of the statute, highlighted like a textbook. If the owner has underinvested, that's on the owner, he continued, like logic had never met an invoice. He turned to the room. We have rights. We can sue. A woman with a badge from the hospital in her pocket raised her hand. Can you sue them into new lights? She asked, gentle as a good 4-stick. Somewhere between item 4 and the part where you can submit hardship requests, I stood. I didn't plan it. My knees did. Priya looked surprised and then relieved, the way you look when the person you were hoping would show finally arrives. I walked to the front and took the mic. It was warmer than I expected. Good evening, I said, my voice not a performance but a stove left on low. I'm Margaret. I let the word sit. Someone coughed the cough of curiosity. I am the owner of Sycamore Homes. Gasps are for theater. This room made a quieter sound, people adjusting. Amanda's head snapped as if someone had called her in a language she used to speak. Chad said, no you're not, as if disagreeing makes gravity a flavor. I nodded toward Priya, who nodded toward the laptop, which nodded toward the paperwork I'd delayed publicly until this moment. My name was there, not behind a bowl of other names, not hiding. It looked like a woman reclaiming her signature. I bought this building because I believe people should live in places that don't make them afraid if the power goes out, I said. I raised my daughter on 3 rules: we fix what we break, we pay what we owe, and we keep our voices human. I didn't look at Chad when I said human, but the word turned its head toward him anyway. I also believe in not penalizing the good. So anyone who's been here more than 3 years can apply for an adjustment based on income. Anyone who's a caretaker or a night shift nurse gets priority for renovated units near the quiet side. Anyone who's kept this building decent by doing the trash pickup when the bins overflow, you know who you are, will get a rent freeze for 1 year. Come see us. Show us receipts. We'll show you ours. Chad laughed in that way that turns rooms into Tinder. This is personal, he said. This is vengeance. You're Amanda's mother. He said the word mother like it was a traffic violation. Silence went heavy for a second and then light again because truth is lighter than what it replaces. It is personal, I replied. So is every apartment where a child does homework on a table with 4 legs. So is every lock that works. I placed my palm on the table and let the microphones catch the sound of skin meeting wood. As for vengeance, if I wanted it, I wouldn't have offered hardship adjustments. I would have let the building rot and called it profit. He moved toward me, 2 steps, then a third. The room's air stiffened. Priya's hand hovered over the phone in that discreet way we learn to protect ourselves without making a scene. Amanda spoke, and her voice had a crack in it that let light through. Chad, she said, sit. He didn't. She came to stand beside me, not behind. Mom, she whispered, and in that word was a whole year of weather. I felt her shoulder just there, like we were standing at the stove again trying to decide whether the sauce needed salt. I used to think rent was a measure of love, Amanda said, louder now. That paying more proved something. What it proved was that I didn't know the price of kindness. She turned to the room. If anyone needs help with forms, I'll be here Thursday night to help you fill them out. I'm good at forms. She is. She always was. She could turn a DMV line into a fellowship of travelers. The meeting ended not with applause but with pens. People queued for the sign-up sheets. A grandfather with a cane told me about the time the elevator hiccuped for an hour with his wife inside. He didn't ask for anything. He just wanted the elevator to feel like a place you could trust. I said it would. He believed me. You could see it, the relief. It made my knees a little weak. On his way out, Chad hissed a promise shaped like a threat. You won't get away with this, he said, switching the pronoun the way bullies do when the crowd stops participating. Legal pressure works both ways. He didn't know about the file already sitting in Johns's office, a record of missed rent, of hostile emails, of a shove in a hallway that the camera didn't miss. He didn't know about the protective order Amanda had quietly discussed with a counselor who called me ma'am and meant it. He didn't know that when the law takes its time, it still arrives. He found out. A week later, papers landed on his doormat that had the weight of grown consequences. A month later, he left in a moving van that sounded too cheerful for the work it was doing. Amanda came to my apartment carrying a half-dead plant and a bag of clothes. I didn't know where else to go, she said, and the truth is she did. She came to the only place that has ever said yes without an invoice. Do you think justice is loud? It's paperwork and a key. It's a woman standing beside another woman at a counter and checking the box that says emergency contact. If you've ever watched a door open that you thought had forgotten your name, leave one word below, open. And if you want to hear how we learned to be quieter together than we ever were apart, stay. I'll put the kettle on. We learned to be ordinary again, which is a luxury people don't advertise. Mornings smelled like coffee and laundry soap. The sycamore outside my window did its old trick, losing and making leaves without needing anyone to clap. Amanda slept 12 hours her first night and woke with the face of a person who doesn't owe a performance to a toothbrush. We wrote lists. Lists turn panic into errands. Call the bank. Cancel the joint phone plan. Forward the mail. Return the wedding gift we never thought to ask for in the beginning, permission to proceed without permission. I sold the building when the work was done, when the stairwells were bright, the fire doors behaved, the boiler believed in New Year's morning. I sold it to a woman who used to be a tenant there and who'd become a contractor because she got tired of asking landlords to fix things that she can fix with 2 tools and a day's good mood. We sat in Johns's office with signatures and lemon bars, and the sale check felt heavy in a way money feels when it is going to pay attention. I donated half the proceeds to the women's shelter that sits between a school and a church and knows both kinds of prayers. We wrote the check plain, without a press release, then bought bins of new socks because nothing says dignity like a clean pair at the right time. The director cried the way professionals cry, eyes and breath, no noise, and hugged me in a hallway that smelled like crayons and resolve. "We'll name the new intake room after your mother," she said. "The diary room." We laughed. Then we cried again because laughter invites tears to come out without pretending they are breaking news. I bought a small house with a porch and a kitchen that remembers grandmother's. I painted one wall blue because Tom once said blue is the color you get when sky marries water. I kept the diary in the drawer beside the stove, where recipes and rescue plans live. I kept my habit, 3 truths in the morning. The cup is clean. The window is open. The light is kind. I added a 4th that changes when it wants. Some days, my daughter is home. Some days, my daughter is brave. Some days, my daughter is learning to sing without being asked to audition. Amanda found work she doesn't have to explain at parties, coordinating services at the shelter, translating chaos into schedules, teaching paperwork to hold a woman's hand instead of slap it. We eat dinner together on Tuesdays like church, no sermon. She brings me stories about good news that doesn't make the news, a woman who got her birth certificate from a county that didn't believe in computers, a child who learned the word privacy and used it correctly, a volunteer who never shows up empty-handed. I tell her stories about roofs and how rain teaches you to listen, about boilers you have to sweet talk until the new one arrives, about tenants who plant herbs in coffee cans and turn the shared porch into a kitchen. We make a life that doesn't need to prove itself to a lobby. Sometimes people ask if I regret the rent increase. I tell them regret is a good broom, you use it to sweep before guests arrive, not to beat yourself in the yard. I do not regret asking an adult man to pay the price that everyone else in his hall was already paying. I do not regret offering grace to those who needed it most. If I regret anything, it is that I learned late how to keep my voice when someone knocks the wind out of the room. But late is not the same as never. There is still soup to make. Do you think a mother can forgive herself for not knowing all the answers on the first day of the test? Do you think a daughter can learn to be a woman beside the woman who learned late and still learned? If this put a hand on your back and helped you straighten without cracking, leave me one word so the next person knows where to sit. Here. Steady. Beginning. Tell me the small habit that keeps your name belonging to you. 3 truths before coffee, a walk without your phone, writing your grocery list on the back of last year's appointment card because you honor both needs the same. And if this is the kind of room you want to come back to, quiet, cinematic, honest, subscribe. Not for numbers. For company. For the relief of hearing a life told without shouting. At night I rinse the cup and set it to dry. I check the lock not because I fear, but because I'm in charge. I press my palm to the counter and feel the house say its facts back to me like a child reciting. The cup is clean. The window is open. The light is kind. A 4th, because some days a woman is allowed to repeat herself with gratitude. I am Margaret. I am not an extra mouth. I am the table.